I never thought I'd be the person to cause a scene at a wedding, let alone my own sister's. But when someone steals $30,000 from your dying mother's cancer treatment fund, the rules of social etiquette seem less important than justice. I'm 29, living in Minneapolis, where I moved back home 2 years ago when Mom was diagnosed with stage 3 breast cancer. The prognosis wasn't great, but there was hope with an experimental treatment not covered by insurance. My brother Jake, my sister Amber, and I agreed to pool our resources to help cover the $75,000 cost. We each committed to contributing whatever we could over 6 months. Mom didn't know the details. We told her we'd handle everything. She just needed to focus on getting better. Jake and I both emptied our savings accounts. I took on extra shifts at the hospital where I work as a nurse, often pulling doubles until my feet felt like they were bleeding in my shoes. Jake sold his beloved vintage car collection that he'd been building since high school. Between us, we managed to put together $45,000. Amber, always the successful one with her marketing executive job in Chicago, promised to contribute $30,000. She had just bought a new condo downtown and always posted photos of her luxury vacations and designer purchases on Instagram. Money was never tight for her, at least that's what she wanted everyone to believe. "Don't worry about it," she told us during our weekly family Zoom calls. "I've got my portion covered. Just focus on being there for Mom." Months passed. Mom started preliminary treatments while we waited to qualify for the experimental program. The specialists were optimistic, but insisted we needed to secure the full funding before they could proceed with the complete treatment plan. "Where's Amber's contribution?" I finally asked Jake one evening as we sat in the dim light of Mom's kitchen, reviewing medical bills spread across the table like fallen leaves. "She said she's working on it," Jake replied, but I could see the worry lines deepening around his eyes. "Her investment maturity date is coming up next month." I nodded, but something felt off. Amber had been unusually absent lately, making excuses to miss hospital visits and family meetings. Meanwhile, her Instagram told a different story. Weekend trips to Napa Valley, a new designer wardrobe, and suddenly an engagement announcement with photos of a massive diamond ring that must have cost a fortune. "I'm getting married," she announced on our next family call. Mom managed a weak smile from her hospital bed. "We're thinking a destination wedding in the Bahamas. Small, intimate, just family and close friends." Something snapped inside me. "That's wonderful," I said, keeping my voice steady. "How's that investment coming along? The doctors need to know if we can proceed with Mom's treatment plan." "Oh," Amber's smile faltered slightly. "There's been a slight delay. Market fluctuations, you know how it is. But don't worry, I'll have it sorted soon." After the call, I couldn't shake my suspicions. I did something I'm not proud of. I asked a friend who works at Amber's bank to look into her account. It was unethical, possibly illegal, but I was desperate. What my friend discovered confirmed my worst fears. There had never been any investment. Amber had been lying to us. I confronted her privately first, calling her late one night after finishing my shift. "Where's the money, Amber?" I asked without preamble. "What money?" Her voice was casual, but I could hear the underlying tension. "The $30,000 you promised for Mom's treatment, the money that could save her life." Silence stretched between us, heavy and damning. "Look," she finally said, "things are complicated right now. The wedding is costing more than we expected, and James and I just put a deposit down on a house in Lake Forest. I'll get the money together eventually, but..." "Eventually?" My voice rose despite my efforts to stay calm. "Mom doesn't have eventually. The doctors said we need to start the full treatment within the next 2 months if it's going to have any chance of working. You don't understand the pressure I'm under." Amber snapped. "Everyone expects this perfect wedding, this perfect life. Do you know how much it costs to maintain the image people have of me?" I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "So your image is worth more than Mom's life?" She hung up. For the next week, I called and texted, but Amber ghosted me completely. Jake tried too, with the same result. Meanwhile, Mom grew weaker, and the doctors became less optimistic about her chances without the specialized treatment. Then the wedding invitations arrived. Embossed cream-colored paper in expensive envelopes announced Amber and James's celebration at the Ritz-Carlton. The estimated cost of just the venue and catering would easily cover what she owed for Mom's treatment. I showed Jake the invitation. Do you realize what this means? She's spending the money that could save Mom on centerpieces and champagne towers. Jake looked torn. Maybe she's getting the money from James's family? Or taking out loans? She told me directly she's using the money for the wedding and a house, I said. She's choosing a party over Mom's life. We tried one last time to reason with her, sending a joint email laying out exactly what her decision meant for Mom's prognosis. Her reply was brief and cold. I've contributed enough to this family over the years. I deserve my happiness too. That's when I made my decision. If Amber wouldn't do the right thing privately, then maybe public pressure would force her hand. It wasn't about revenge. It was about saving Mom. The wedding day arrived, sunny and perfect. The Ritz-Carlton ballroom was decorated like something out of a fairy tale. White roses and crystal chandeliers, champagne flowing freely, a string quartet playing softly in the corner. I estimated the cost at well over $100,000. I waited until the reception, after the ceremony but before the dinner. The moment the best man finished his toast, I stood up, champagne glass in hand. Jake grabbed my arm, his eyes pleading, but I gently removed his hand. I'd like to make a toast too, I announced, my voice carrying across the suddenly quiet room. To my sister, Amber, who has always known exactly what she wants and how to get it. Amber's face froze in a smile, her eyes warning me to sit down. Not everyone knows this, I continued, but our mother is currently dying of cancer. There was an experimental treatment that could have saved her life, costing $75,000. Jake and I contributed $45,000, emptying our savings and working extra jobs. Amber promised the remaining $30,000. The room was completely silent now. I could feel hundreds of eyes on me, but I kept my gaze fixed on my sister. Instead, she decided that having the perfect wedding was more important than saving our mother's life. So while we're all enjoying these beautiful centerpieces and this excellent champagne, our mother is in a hospital bed, running out of time because her daughter prioritized a party over her life. I raised my glass higher. So here's to Amber, who always gets exactly what she wants, no matter the cost to others. The silence that followed was deafening. James was staring at Amber with shock and confusion. Her in-laws looked horrified, and Amber's face had drained of all color. I set down my glass and walked out, ignoring the whispers that erupted behind me. Jake followed me to the parking lot. Was that really necessary? He asked, but there was no real anger in his voice. I don't know, I admitted, but nothing else was working and Mom is running out of time. The fallout from my wedding revelation was immediate and intense. As I walked to my car in the Ritz-Carlton parking lot, my phone exploded with notifications. Amber's friends were sending me furious messages, calling me jealous and spiteful. But there were other messages too, from James's family, from distant relatives, even from a few of Amber's colleagues who had attended the wedding. Is this true? They all asked in different ways. Did she really take money meant for your mother's cancer treatment? I didn't respond to any of them. This wasn't about public shaming for its own sake. It was a desperate attempt to save my mother's life. Either it would work or it wouldn't, but I had done all I could. Jake called me the next morning. He sounded exhausted. Amber and James left the reception early, he said. Apparently they had a massive fight at the hotel. James had no idea about Mom's treatment fund. That surprised me. She never told him? About any of it? According to his sister, who I ran into as I was leaving, Amber told James that Mom refused treatment and wanted to go naturally, that we were the ones pushing medical intervention against her wishes. My blood ran cold. The depth of Amber's deception was staggering. That's insane. Mom's been fighting for her life, trying every treatment available. I know, Jake sighed. James is devastated. Apparently, he comes from old money. Very old money. The wedding was actually modest by his family's standards. He told his sister he would have paid for Mom's treatment in full if he'd known. I sat down heavily on my couch, trying to process this information. So Amber lied to everyone. To us about the money. To James about Mom's wishes. Seems that way. We sat in silence for a moment. connected by the static of the phone line and the weight of our sister's betrayal. 3 days later, I was at the hospital with Mom when James walked in. He looked like he hadn't slept in days, his expensive suit wrinkled, dark circles under his eyes. He carried a leather portfolio under his arm. "Can we talk?" he asked quietly. I nodded and led him to the small waiting room down the hall from Mom's room. He sat across from me, hands clasped tightly together. "I want to apologize," he began. "I had no idea about any of this. Amber told me your mother had declined treatment and that the family was at peace with her decision." "That's not true," I said. "We've been desperately trying to get her into this experimental program. It's her best chance." James nodded. "I know that now." He opened the portfolio and slid a document across the small table between us. "This is a cashier's check for $75,000 made out to the treatment center. I've already called them to ensure it will cover the full program." I stared at the check, my vision blurring with tears. "James, you don't have to do this. It's not your responsibility." "Yes, it is," he said firmly. "I married Amber, which makes your family my family too. Besides, this isn't about responsibility. It's about doing what's right." "What about Amber?" I asked, finally looking up from the check. "Where is she?" James's expression hardened. "We're taking some time apart. She's staying at her friend's place in Chicago." He hesitated. "She still doesn't think she did anything wrong. She says the treatment probably wouldn't work anyway, and that I'm being manipulated by you and Jake." The familiar anger flared up again. "The doctors gave Mom a 60% chance with this treatment. Without it, less than 10%. "I know," James said softly. "I spoke with her oncologist yesterday." I blinked in surprise. "You did?" He nodded. "I wanted to understand everything before making decisions. The doctor said we need to move quickly. The treatment window is closing." In that moment, I realized James was nothing like my sister. Where she was selfish and deceptive, he was thoughtful and direct. I felt a pang of guilt for involving him in our family drama. "I'm sorry about the wedding," I said. "I shouldn't have." James held up a hand to stop me. "No, you did exactly what you needed to do. If you hadn't spoken up, I might never have known the truth, and your mother might have lost her chance." 2 days later, Mom started the experimental treatment program. The doctors were cautiously optimistic, saying she was still within the ideal window for maximum effectiveness. I sat beside her during the first treatment, holding her hand as the medications dripped slowly into her veins. "Where did the money come from?" she asked. She wasn't supposed to know about our fundraising efforts, but hospitals are full of gossip, and eventually, she'd pieced it together. "James contributed it," I said simply, not wanting to burden her with the full story. She studied my face. "And Amber? She hasn't visited in weeks." I considered lying, protecting her from the painful truth about her daughter, but Mom had always valued honesty above comfort. "Amber made some selfish choices," I said carefully. "She promised to contribute to your treatment, but used the money for her wedding instead. When I confronted her publicly, James found out and stepped in to help." Mom closed her eyes, a single tear sliding down her cheek. "I always worried about her," she whispered. "Even as a little girl, she struggled to think beyond herself. I thought she'd grow out of it." "Some people don't," I said, squeezing her hand gently. "And some people surprise you," Mom replied, opening her eyes to look at me. "Like you and James." In the weeks that followed, Mom's condition stabilized. The treatment was harsh. There were days when she could barely speak through the nausea and fatigue, but her latest scans showed the tumors beginning to shrink. It wasn't a miracle cure, but it was hope, tangible and real. Amber remained conspicuously absent. She sent a text to Jake asking about Mom, but never replied when he updated her on the treatment progress. According to James, who visited the hospital regularly despite his marital troubles, she was telling friends and colleagues that we had ambushed her at the wedding out of jealousy and spite. "She's rewriting history," James said wearily one evening as we shared coffee in the hospital cafeteria. "Creating a narrative where she's the victim." "Are you going to divorce her?" I asked bluntly. He stared into his coffee cup. "I don't know. I still love the person I thought she was, but I'm not sure that person exists." I nodded, understanding completely. The sister I grew up with, the one who held my hand on the first day of school, who taught me how to apply makeup before my first date, who cried with me when our dog died, seemed to have vanished, replaced by someone I barely recognized. Then, on a rainy Tuesday afternoon 6 weeks into Mom's treatment, Amber appeared at the hospital. I was coming back from the cafeteria when I saw her standing awkwardly in the hallway outside Mom's room. She looked thinner, her designer clothes hanging loosely on her frame, her usually perfect makeup slightly smudged. "What are you doing here?" I asked, not bothering to hide the coldness in my voice. She flinched but stood her ground. "I came to see Mom." "Why now, after everything?" Amber looked down at the polished hospital floor. "James is filing for an annulment," she said quietly. "His family's lawyers contacted me yesterday." Of course, she wasn't here out of concern for Mom. She was here because her perfect life was crumbling around her. Typical Amber, thinking only of herself even now. "That doesn't answer my question," I pressed. She looked up, her eyes suddenly fierce. "You have no idea what it's like to be me. To always be the one everyone expects to succeed, to shine. Do you know how much pressure that is? How terrifying it is to think you might fail. So terrifying that you'd let Mom die rather than admit you couldn't afford both a luxury wedding and your portion of her treatment?" I was aware of my voice rising, of nurses glancing our way, but I couldn't stop. "We all have struggles, Amber. Jake and I emptied our savings accounts. I worked double shifts until my feet bled. But we did it because that's what family does." Amber's face contorted with a mix of anger and something else. Shame, perhaps, though I'd never seen her show it before. "You don't understand," she hissed. "James's family expected a certain type of wedding. I had to prove I belonged in their world. And the house in Lake Forest, do you know what kind of statement that makes? I couldn't back out of either without looking like a failure." I stared at her, truly seeing my sister for perhaps the first time. Behind the designer clothes and perfect makeup was someone desperately insecure, willing to sacrifice anything, even our mother's life, to maintain her carefully constructed image. "So Mom's life was worth less than your social climbing?" I asked quietly. "That's not fair," she protested, but her voice wavered. "The doctors said the treatment was experimental. There were no guarantees." "There never are with cancer," I replied. "But a 60% chance is better than no chance at all." Amber glanced toward Mom's room, hesitating. "Is she awake? Can I see her?" Part of me wanted to block the doorway, to protect Mom from more hurt. But it wasn't my decision to make. "She's awake," I said finally. "But I'm warning you, Amber. If you upset her or try to justify what you did, I will personally drag you out of this hospital." She nodded and slipped past me into the room. I followed, unwilling to leave Mom alone with her. Mom was sitting up in bed, looking better than she had in weeks. The experimental treatment was brutal, but it seemed to be working. Her face brightened when she saw Amber, then dimmed slightly as she registered the tension between us. "Amber," she said simply. "You came." Amber stood awkwardly at the foot of the bed. "Hi, Mom, how are you feeling?" "Better, actually. The doctors are cautiously optimistic." An uncomfortable silence fell. I took my usual seat beside Mom's bed, watching Amber carefully. She looked like she wanted to run. "I heard about what happened," Mom said finally, "with the treatment money." Amber paled. "Who told you?" "Does it matter?" Mom's voice was gentle but firm. "Is it true, Amber? Did you use money promised for my treatment for your wedding instead?" For a moment, I thought Amber might lie, might spin one of her elaborate stories to make herself the victim. But something in Mom's steady gaze seemed to deflate her. "Yes," she whispered. "I did." Mom closed her eyes briefly, absorbing the confirmation of what she'd already known. When she opened them again, they were filled with a sadness that made my heart ache. "Why?" she asked simply. Amber sank into the chair on the other side of the bed. "I was in too deep," she admitted. "The wedding, the house. I'd already committed, and everyone expected so much from me. James's family, my friends, my colleagues. I couldn't disappoint them." "But you could disappoint us," I said, unable to help myself. "Your actual family." Mom reached over and placed her hand on mine. a silent request for patience. Amber, she said, turning back to my sister, I've always been proud of your ambition, your drive. But what good is success if you lose yourself in the process? What good is impressing strangers if you betray the people who love you most? Tears began to streak down Amber's face, ruining her careful makeup. I don't know who I am anymore, Mom, she confessed, her voice breaking. I've been pretending for so long, pretending I'm richer than I am, more successful, more confident. The real me never seems good enough. The real you was always enough for us, Mom said softly. Amber broke down then, sobbing in a way I hadn't seen since we were children. Mom held out her arms, and Amber collapsed into them, her body shaking with grief. I slipped out of the room, giving them privacy for this moment of reckoning. In the hallway, I found Jake and James deep in conversation. They looked up as I approached. Amber's here, I said. She's with Mom now. James's expression tightened. How is that going? Honestly, better than I expected. Mom is being Mom. Compassionate but straightforward. Jake nodded. That sounds like her. Do you think Amber actually regrets what she did? I think she regrets getting caught, I said. But maybe that's the first step toward real remorse. James ran a hand through his hair, looking conflicted. I should talk to her. We haven't really spoken since I left. Are you still going through with the annulment? I asked. He sighed heavily. I don't know. I love her, despite everything. But trust is fundamental. And right now, I don't know if we can rebuild that. Jake put a hand on James's shoulder. Whatever you decide, you're still family to us. What you did for Mom, we can never repay that. James shook his head. There's nothing to repay. I did what anyone would do. Not anyone, I said, thinking of my sister. The door to Mom's room opened, and Amber emerged, her face tear-stained but somehow lighter. She froze when she saw James, uncertainty flashing across her features. James, she whispered, I didn't know you were here. I come every Tuesday and Thursday, he said. Your mom likes to play chess. Amber looked startled by this revelation, this evidence of a relationship that had developed without her. Oh, an awkward silence stretched between them. Can we talk? James finally asked. Privately? Amber nodded, and they walked toward the small waiting room at the end of the hall. Jake and I watched them go, uncertain what would happen next. Do you think they'll work it out? Jake asked. I have no idea, I admitted. But that's their journey to figure out. We went into Mom's room together. She looked tired, but peaceful, the emotional conversation with Amber having taken a toll. How are you feeling? Jake asked, sitting beside her. Lighter, she said. Sometimes the hardest conversations are the most necessary ones. I took her hand. Did Amber actually apologize? Mom smiled faintly. In her way, she's still learning how. But I think this experience has cracked something open in her, something that needed to break for healing to begin. Do you forgive her? I couldn't help asking. Mom was quiet for a moment, considering. Forgiveness is a process, not a moment, she said finally. I'm starting that process, but trust will take longer to rebuild. Over the next few months, a fragile new normal began to emerge. Mom continued her treatments, and the results were promising. The tumors were shrinking steadily, and her energy was returning. The doctors were now talking about remission as a real possibility, not just a distant hope. Amber and James didn't get the annulment. Instead, they entered intensive couples therapy, working to rebuild what had been broken. Amber also started seeing a therapist individually, beginning the difficult work of untangling her self-worth from external validation. She visited Mom regularly now, sometimes bringing home-cooked meals or comfortable pajamas. Small offerings, but sincere ones. She'd also set up a payment plan with James to reimburse him for the treatment money, insisting on this despite his protests. It wasn't about the money, she explained to me once, but about taking responsibility for her actions. As for me, I watched this transformation with cautious optimism. The wound of Amber's betrayal was still fresh, the trust between us severely damaged. But each time she showed up, really showed up, for Mom, for our family, I felt a tiny piece begin to heal. One evening, As I was leaving the hospital after a long shift, I found Amber sitting alone in the lobby, staring into space. "Amber, are you okay?" I asked, sitting beside her. She turned to me, her eyes red from crying. "The strangest thing happened today," she said. "I was cleaning out my closet, getting rid of all these designer clothes I bought to impress people who don't even matter, and I found this." She held out her hand. In her palm lay a small, smooth stone with a hole through the center, a wish stone, as we'd called them as children. "Do you remember?" she asked. "We found it at the lake the summer I turned 12. You told me it was magic, that if I made a wish while looking through the hole, it would come true." I smiled at the memory. "And you wished for?" "For us to always be sisters, no matter what," she finished. I was so worried about going to middle school, about making new friends and fitting in. I was scared we'd grow apart. "And now?" I asked quietly. Amber closed her fingers around the stone. "Now I'm terrified it's too late, that I've broken something that can't be fixed." I was silent for a long moment, weighing my words carefully. "When Mom was first diagnosed," I said finally, "one of her doctors told me something I'll never forget. He said that broken bones, when they heal properly, often become stronger at the break point than they were before." "Do you think that's possible for us?" Amber asked, vulnerability raw in her voice. "I don't know," I answered honestly, "but I think it's worth finding out." She nodded, a small spark of hope lighting her eyes. "I'd like that." As we sat there in the quiet hospital lobby, I realized that exposing Amber at her wedding hadn't just been about saving Mom's life. It had also, unexpectedly, been about saving my sister from herself. The road ahead would be long and uncertain, full of difficult conversations and painful reckonings. Trust, once broken, doesn't mend easily. But for the first time in months, I could see a path forward. Not back to what we were before, but towards something new, something potentially stronger at the broken places.